Hello and welcome to Annual Planner for Sports version 2.0 how-to video part 2. In the first installment we covered the basic structure of the annual planner that involves data entry pages, report and analysis, and setting pages. In last installment we covered mostly data entry pages and setting pages. In this one we're going to load up a workbook with the example data and we're going to cover reports and analysis. Hopefully you did saw in the first installment that there was a problem with the mouse. So something was happening with the mouse pointer. It was working fine on my computer, but once the Camtasia screencast program captured the screen, the mouse got stuck in one position. Hopefully that didn't bother you much and you could understand the demonstration. One thing that also happened and I need to replicate it again. So once we enter in the monitoring database, we enter a new entry. We got this pop-up window, and basically it says that there's a problem with in a reference formula, and that's nothing to be worried about because it basically because of the lack of enough of data in some of the formulas. So if you go here in the formula, name manager, some of these formulas involve offset function, for example, this one, and if there's not enough of data, the function can report the error message and that triggers the pop-up window. Once we enter enough data, there's no such thing. How much is enough? I would probably say for some metrics we need at least 7 entries per player. So until that, you're probably gonna get this annoying pop-up. But as I said, it's nothing to worry about. Everything's worked perfectly fine. Before proceeding with the example data, it's important to mention that with this package, I also included the version, I call it bare bones annual planner. So that's a workbook without analytics, and it works on both Windows and Mac platforms. I think might actually work also in earlier platforms like 2007, but I haven't tested it. So I have tested it in 2013. I'm pretty sure it's going to work on 2010 on Windows and on 2011 on Mac, which I tested. I'm going to open it. So this is the one. So this version contains only the annual plan without any metrics or any fancy add-ons. So let's cover reports. For that we need some example data. This is a pretty big Excel workbook. I think it's around 3 megabytes, yeah, around 3.5 megabytes. So it's similar to the version you're gonna use. Just it doesn't have a macro button over here. The button is located over here, as with the other version over here. So the only difference between this version that we already have pre-filled example data is difference between training database. As you can see, we have plenty of data over here, and as we slide here, I enter some recovery methods, also enter some injury and illness, both occurrences and status. One thing I need to again warn is that coaches usually forget to enter days off. So if you use sRPE system, which is already built in this software, you also need to enter the days off, and this involves writing 0 on sRPE and duration of the training also to 0. So that means that's a day off. So basically, if you have 30 players, that involves 210 entries per week. And as I said in an earlier installment, you can also have pre-written data entry, so you can just copy paste athletes, because most of the time you're probably going to have in case of team practice, you're gonna have full participation and team practice. So you can quickly copy, paste, and modify it. When you get into a groove, it's gonna take a couple of minutes per day to just fill in the data. As we can see over here, it's a lot of data. I think maybe around 6 months worth of data for each player. Same thing for monitoring database. We have some random data just to show you how reporting works. So we have for every day we have and for every player we have entries, random entries for a couple of metrics we put in a database and some random data. So annual plan, one important thing is that because the metrics and training load is related to a date in a year, and this part of the annual planner, the training load box, is related to microcycle. If you change the beginning of a microcycle, for example, I'm gonna move it to January, you need to refresh the pivot table so these bars can move or slide. Same thing, every time you enter some data, you also need to refresh it. First time it loads, it might take some time, but every successive refresh is gonna be quicker. So I'm gonna click refresh. It's gonna take some time because it needs to load PowerPivot and data into a PowerPivot. Because we moved the beginning of the year, this chart should shift, and it did. So that means this date, it now begins on a represent different microcycle. It's still updating. As I said, sometimes it's slow. Okay, done. So that's one important thing. When it comes to training load, clicking over is going to take you to a data entry tab. Going back to annual plan, we have simple load, which represent weekly sum of load. Monotony, which represent basically how monotonous the training is, and strain, which is a multiplication of load and monotony. It gives you the training strain. Before covering the red dots, which is important aspect, we can select a given player to visualize his load, and the gray line represents the team, or at least everyone here in a slicer. So if I select everyone on the slicer, I just disregard the filter, they're the same. So which means that the gray one represents the team. If I select one player, I can see his the difference between his reaction to the team average. Hopefully that makes sense, and it's quite interesting feature because you can quickly see what's being planned and how the players are reacting to it. If you want to visualize it a bit better, you can click this cell, go to a view, you're gonna freeze panes, I'm gonna freeze here. So when you slide down, I'm just gonna hide this. So when you slide down, you can see the training load, analytics, and training periods. You can also see how they maybe react to a training camp, and it gives you a context which is quite important in decision making. Again, different athletes. You can also select maybe different groups. So for example, you might select, okay, let's see how attackers are reacting to the rest of the group. Maybe these guys are attackers, so you can see how they're reacting to the group. Again, this might be junior players, senior players, whatever it's meaning to you. Red dot represent lack of data, and that's a very interesting concept. As I already alluded, that every day should have a data entry both in a training duration and a session RPE, so the training load for a day could be calculated. If there's not enough of data, so if it's less than 7 days in this microcycle, we're gonna have a red dot. This means that this measure might be unreliable because there's not enough data. This is true for both a single individual and everyone. If I have everyone selected, that means the the athletes that started this week. So, for example, if I have 30 players, the red dot means that it doesn't mean that not all 30 players have data entry for 7 days. It means that, for example, if only 10 players enter data in this period, not all 10 have 7 days entries. Hopefully that makes sense, because in real life you're probably going to have a lot of missed data. You're going to have players that went to a national camp, national training camp. Maybe some of them were injured or removed from training, so they are removed from a database. They don't have data entry per that day, and that's a problem also with the mean value, the average of metrics. I think in an ideal world, in a maybe next version of Excel, these bars could be actually box plots, and that could give you actually distribution of this, and a width of a box plot can represent the number of athletes in a microcycle that contribute to the mean value. That's when it comes to a training load. Training or metric monitoring, it's pretty similar. That involves an analysis of 3 metrics you select from this box. For example, it could be maximum aerobic speed. As you can see, we also have a visual indication of a context of what's a bad score, what's a medium score, and what's excellent score, so you can see how close they are to that value. Again, by clicking on the metrics, it's going to take you to the data entry page. Going back to the start over here, we can select athletes and metrics, and over here, as we said, for every metric we have bad, average, and excellent score defined. This also gives us context in a graph, as we already saw. Going back to the annual plan, so we can select, for example, mass, and we can select, let's say, yo-yo intermittent recovery. So we can see in this case, and that's an interesting feature, these are all athletes selected over here. If I select only one, it's going to give me data for that player, and also the gray line is going to represent the mean of the squad. So you can see, is this guy reacting better than the squad, and also it gives you quick estimation of his score compared to the bad, average, and excellent score. So again, it gives you indication how is he related to the squad, and it also gives you indication of the absolute value of his score. Is he's below bad value, around average, or better than excellent. Selecting all players. Again, we can select multiple players, maybe a specialistic group, attackers, defenders, and see how they are reacting on average compared to the group and compared to the defined values. Again, we can select different, for example, might be body weight, might be anything, might be game statistics, whatever. It gives you quick estimation what's happening to the KPIs, or key performance indicators, depending on what you are doing in a training. So this might be a training phase where you work on maximum power. You can check out maybe broad jump or vertical jump and see what's happening with that metric. Going back to the red dots, as I said, this might need some inspection. So you want to inspect what might be causing it, and maybe you forgot to enter the day off, maybe you forgot to enter session RPE or duration, so the training load couldn't be calculated. So going back to the start menu, these two noted by red are basically finding errors in the data. Clicking over here, finding blank entries. So again, blank entry represent either lack of session RPE or training duration field in a training database. So basically going back, giving you exact example, training database. So if this is empty, training load couldn't be calculated. So I'm gonna put this over here, and using this find blank entries, it's a pivot table that shows me who has the blank entry and at what date. So 3rd of March we have a blank entry, in this case me, for Mladen. And the interesting thing with pivot table, you can double click it and it's going to show you that particular entry and the surrounding columns. You can always delete this, and it gives you grand total. It's color coded, so you can quickly see who has the most lack of entries. Again, this is related to either lack of session RP or training duration. Going back to the find lack of daily entries, it gives you how many daily entries a player have in a given microcycle. In this case, anything below 7 is red flagged. So that means this player doesn't have 7 daily entries in a given microcycle. And again, it gives you a quick summary who is worse, who's the best. So again, this might be related to someone missing practice. Again, that should be written in a training database, and you can write 0 or training duration 0. So because sometimes you can actually have more than 7 entries per week, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have 7 days of entries, because you might have double sessions. For example, Monday could be double session, you forgot to enter Tuesday, and every other day is 1 session per day. Is going to equal to 7, but doesn't necessarily mean those are 7 days. So per every day you need to have at least 1 data entry. Hopefully that makes sense. And again, you can double click here and you can check the data entries that actually aggregate to this cell and see where he might miss the data entry. So again, this is, we miss April the 4th. As you can see, 31st, 1, 2, 3, 4 is missing, 5 and 6. So we can go back and find that player and correct that entry if we want reliable training log estimates. So that's pretty much regarding the training load. We have those two special or specialized tabs that help us find the errors in the data. Now we're going to cover different reports. I have built a lot of them. You can, if you are familiar with the PowerPivot, you can quickly make your own. So attendance basically show how many training sessions in a given were logged in a given microcycle. Again, we can pick and choose. Maybe you want to see how many days off we had. We can just select that one, and we can see per microcycle and per player and a summary. Maybe you want to see how many training sessions we had in the gym, and how many of those, because this is random data, it might differ how many strength sessions we had. So it gives you quick estimation how many sessions each player did in a particular microcycle. Clicking X removes the filter, so allows all the entries to come in. That's training attendance. Training load analysis, pretty similar. It gives you training load per day. So these are days, the columns are days, and rows are players. Over here you can also see the lack of data. If there's empty cell, you can see per that day there's no entry for that player. So you can use this table as well together with those two red tables we covered before. So those are here, the find blank entries and find lack of daily entries. So you can use this tab to also find lack of entries per day. These are again color coded. You might see maybe some guys popping out, maybe they are more red, so they represent that they have more training log. So this is training log for all types of training sessions, training types, and training status. So okay, we might select only strength training sessions. Again, you can quickly see us at which days they're being done, and training load for those sessions. Again, maybe days off. Again, this is random data. These days off should be 0. So you can also use this to debug sort of your training database. Again, you can double click and it's going to take you to the rows that actually generate this number. Next one is a competition analysis. We can see the competitions being done in the microcycles per player, and we can maybe see how many games we draw, how many losses, how many wins. Again, this is interesting and it's a nice example. So we have, as you can see, win and won. That's probably error in a database, because you want to be consistent with data entry. That's why we have a drop-down list. And if you use a drop-down list, there's less room for error, if that makes sense. So you want to consistently mark down the different training types, training status, and injuries, because it's going to be easier to summarize the data. Going back to the competition analysis, so again, this gives you indication of how many games were won. If you remove the filter, that's how many games were played. We can say, okay, how many games were played away, how many might be played on location number 1, location number 2, whatever you're using. Next analysis or report is recovery methods. So it gives you indication how long recovery methods being used per given week. So the columns represent weeks and rows represent athletes. So again, let's say how many foam rolling being done, 15 minutes, hydrotherapy, stretching. These are total if you remove the filter, and how many of them were being done. Again, this is random data, so it's not necessarily logical how many being done on a day off. So some players might report doing recovery sessions on a day off. We might also say how many recovery sessions we did when we were away. Maybe we were traveling. So how many of them were being done on away? How many being done on a pool? So these are, it gives you a quick report and a quick dashboard of recovery methods. Travel analysis, pretty much similar. The results are expressed in hours. You can select, again, we can filter out the microcycles, depending if you want to, summarize per given time frame, but usually these should be all selected, or basically the filter should be off. We can select how many traveling we had with a airplane, bus, and so forth. And maybe how many, again we have a location, how many away, traveling, and so forth. Again, doesn't necessarily is logical at the moment because again it's a random data. Metrics collection analysis. So this is a calculus how many data entries per a metric we have per a player per a given week. So again, columns are weeks, actually microcycles, and rows are athletes. So we might say how many entries we have for body weight. So we can see in which microcycle this athlete enter his body weight, or actually coach enter his body weight in a database. Double click is going to take us to that direct entry. Okay, we're going to double click, and that's a monitoring database entry, and we can see the actual value. You can always delete this. So that's metrics analysis. It can gives you similar to attendance. It can gives you how regular the players log in KPIs. So if you lack those, the results on the main page or annual plan might be unreliable. For example, mass gives you indication how many entries or how many testing being done for a given player. This is, you can see a grand total, you can see who had the most entries. So this is, in these guys, that's Avery B. Next report is injury and illness occurrence. In this case, I put them together, but they could be definitely split apart. Again, this is a report for occurrence. How many injuries we had? If we want to check how many hamstring injuries we had, we can check over here. So we had hamstring injury here and here. This is a lot of injuries, of course. And we can also check the reoccurrence of the injuries. Re-injury is usually defined the same spot is being injured within, I think, 4 months. So you can check if this being re-injury. We can remove this one and also click severity of the injury. So let's say how many severe hamstring injuries we have, how many moderate we had. And this removes the filter, so it's sum between those two. Same thing for illness. How many illnesses we have? Because this pivot table summarizes both the injury and illness. If they happen at the same day, we're gonna have number 2. So we need to click on an injury location blank, if that makes sense. So that removes the injury entries per that day. If we remove it by clicking over here, I'm gonna show you that on this day, this player, Ariel J, had training log of both, I think this is sorted, but we have eye irritation, and we also had hamstring injury. So that should score us 2. That scores us 2, and might confuse it to begin with, but if you want to check only eye irritations, you need to put this to blank. Again, we can pick and choose illness severity and training type. So when did this happen? Did it happen on a friendly game? So we had these occurrences happening on a friendly game, so that's eye irritation happening on those days. If we remove this filter, actually it's already removed. We can also select how many hamstring injuries we had on a friendly day. We had 2 per this guy, so that's probably entry per illness also, so we can put it blank. So yeah, we removed the illness in this case, so we need to put this to blank. Now we can see how many hamstring injuries we had on a friendly games. Okay, we can also select how many we had on away games. Only one. Again, this gives you a quick report. You can quickly have descriptive statistics, and you might have some idea when are the injuries happening and on what field. You can also enter, as you can see over here in a training database, we also have data for type of surface and equipment and shoes. Might be weather. You can also enter those in trying to slide this one. In injury and illness, you can also add that slicers, and you might check out maybe certain injuries happen on a wet field or when playing with cleats or or whatever. This represents some poor man's option data mining, so it gives you some indication of and might give you some idea of a causation of the injuries. Next report is illness and injury and illness time loss. In this case, we calculate the days loss. So we check out the status. We want to see injury status, and we can see we have lost 1 day in a week number 15, and also we can check total days lost due to injury and illness per given player. Again, this summarizes both the injury and illness, so because a player can be injured and ill at the same time, so that sums up as double. If you want to remove one of them, you just click on the blank. As you can see, this is 2 because he was both ill and injured. If you click blank, oh sorry, that's a illness status. Okay, so we can double check if this doesn't make sense, so we can double check it. So this guy had a status, so he is injured, and he is also semi-recovered. Okay, semi-recovered. Yeah, that makes more sense now. So again, playing with these, double clicking over here, that can give you more information. Again, I decided to put injury and illness together in the same report, mainly because I didn't want to overcomplicate things because they're already complicated. So you can use these two to get injury occurrence and time loss due to injury and illness. Therapy and medicine analysis, it basically gives indication of what's being done. Maybe your medical staff have a rule to report what's being done per players, so they can also log in the data, and this gives you indication of what's being done, maybe a given therapy or whatever. So we can remove the injury status, so we can only see, okay, how many cold therapies we had. I'm gonna remove all the filters, and you can see how many cold therapies being done in this week. So we can see for this guy we had 2 cold therapies. It gives you indication of of therapy being done. I'm gonna show you, before going to athlete profiles, I'm gonna show metric rolling averages. In this case, if you collect HRV, you can see the daily values, which is gray, 7 days rolling average, that's blue, and 28 days rolling average, that's red. That's basically a baseline. So if you have any metric that's collected on a daily basis, you can use this metric rolling average tab to get a insight of is the player jumping over his normal variability, and use it to make any decision making. For example, in HRV, the blue line might represent some form of a baseline, and sorry, the red line represents some form of a baseline that's 28 days long, and 7 days rolling average can represent the last 7 days. You can see maybe his HRV is jumping more than normal, so that might represent more recovery, and going below baseline might represent heavier training load. Again, the jury is still out regarding the HRV analysis and how to make sense of data. So again, we can select individual player, or in this case there's data only for me. If you select only one player, again we have a problem because there's not enough of data. That's the same pop-up window that happened in the first installment. Because there's no data for these guys, there's only data for me over here regarding the HRV. Okay, so we basically covered all the features from annual planner. One very interesting feature that we implemented from a different product, athlete profiles, is an athlete profiling feature. Clicking over here, it's going to take us to a report tab. In this case, we have a metrics in the rows, so we can select different metrics. Let's say yo-yo intermittent recovery, and it gives you room for how many? 20 different metrics. Anything you find important per player and you want to compare. This column represents quick history. Over here we select the player, so we have a drop down list, so we select different player. It's gonna gives us different values. This column represents the last entry, that's this dot over here, and zone represent the location of this value depending on bad, this column, average, and excellent score. So if he is below bad, that's a range number 1. We can quickly see that this in this case body mass index for every is very bad, so it's below, or in this case that's above bad value. As I alluded before, every metric, there's two types of metrics. A more is better and a more is worse. In this case, body mass, the more you have, the worse the score is. Same thing for, let's say, 10 meters sprint time. So the higher the score, the worse the score is. So that's kind of a more is worse type of metric. Your intermittent recovery, the higher the metric, that's the better. In this table, that's automatically picked up based on a bad, average, and excellent, depending on how you define them. So that's a zone. It gives you a quick indication of last score of the athlete, depending on the defined bad, average, and excellent scores. So we have 4 colors. Let's select another player. So this is range number 2. That means he is between bad and average. Going between average and excellent, that's range 3, and over excellent, that's 4. So you can use this to sort out, and you can quickly see the where the player is good at and where he's bad at. Last date represent the date of the last entry, and from this on, this represent the rank. And this is an interesting feature because this represents the rank based on the player selected. So you can select all the players in your team, or you can select different guys. Please note that the guy selected the guy selected needs to be in this group. So that's KCS. If we don't select him or her, that's going to be error. It's still calculating. It's going to be blank. So we need to select KC, KCS. She needs to be in a group. And we're going to see that we're going to see her rank depending on the group selected. That's seven athletes selected. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we can use this to see the ranking of the last score of that player. Same thing as rank, there's a percentile score. It gives you indication of where that athlete is compared to the group. I'll just select everyone so we have more athletes over here. And you can sort the report over here using this button, and we can quickly see how KCS profile and metrics relate to the group. And using this one, we can see how she relates to the absolute values we set, and this one we can see how is she compared to the group. This is a group average. This is a yeah, that's a group average. This is a group standard deviation if you want more information. So this is a group average per this metric. So that's their last scores. This is a group standard deviation. That's a group range for this metric. So if you select Casey and we select only maybe a couple of players, we can see the range of their last scores. Z-score represent another normalization method. It's similar to percentiles, but it shows you also the difference between ranks. Pretty much they correlate a lot, the percentiles and Z-score. So you can see compared to the Z-score, where is this player good? Where he's above the average? So 0 is average of the group, and where is the player better than average or worse than average? As we can see, he's better than average over here, but his score is still bad compared to the absolute values. That probably mean that the whole group is pretty bad. So the group average is 34. As we can see, that's more than 30 as defined as a bad score. Again, this is basically lookup table. It gives you the indication of what's bad, average, and excellent. This is a typical error. If it's defined, we can always click over here. It's going to take you to the table. We can see which metric has a defined typical error. That's useful when you want to make a judgment based if the change was real or maybe a variability in the metric itself. So going back to the metric, going back to the athlete profiles. We also have a target if it's defined, and this is interesting metrics based on data, based on the works by Mike McGuigan and Stuart Cormack. So this is group standard deviations to target. Again, a method of normalizing scores, because we need to use this to put different metrics on the same page, sort of speaking, and that's why we need to use normalization. Because, for example, body mass index might be around 30, yo-yo intermittent recovery is around 2000. So we need to use a method to normalize the scores. The most simple is a rank. We can see the rank. A bit more complex is a percentiles. Most common is a Z-score. And again, we have a standard deviations to target. So how many standard deviations in a group or between individuals there is to the target. So minus means we are away to the target, and plus is basically we are over the defined target. This is useful when you define objectives and training goals. Standard worldwide change is again concept from I think it's Mike McGuigan and Stuart Cormack. So it's pretty similar to standard deviations. Usually if smallest worthwhile change is 0.2 of between individual standard deviation, that's going to be 5 times bigger than this one. Again, you can define smallest worthwhile change over here if you have a testing data. Hopefully all the sports scientists out there working with a team, within the team environment, they estimate the typical error for their metrics and also estimate the smallest worthwhile change. You can set up the target. So in this case, if we go back to the athlete profile, we can see how close we are to the target, or how many smallest worthwhile improvements we need to hit the target. And that's again one way to normalize the scores taking into account the target. Okay, this is a report for one player. Again, we select the player over here and we select the group to which we want to compare this athlete. In this case, we might select the attackers. So let's say this guy is attacker, so we don't want to compare it to the defender, so we might select only the attacking squad, and it gives us indication of his position within the within that specific group of athletes. One thing with this table is that it automatically recognizes the type of metric. So is it more is better or less is better? And this table automatically recognizes it. Unfortunately, this one doesn't. So you need to pay attention to that one. This is a summary for a given metric. So for example, we might pick up maximum aerobic speed. We know more is better. And this gives us a report per the player selected over here. We can again select different athletes. And it's gonna give us those athletes' last scores for that metric. So this is single player report. This is a single metric report. I'm gonna remove the filter, so we're gonna take all the players into account. So again, it gives us, and it's already sorted out. The highest score is on the top, and we can see quickly who's the best in maximum aerobic speed. We can also see who's the highest guy in the squad. We can see over here. For example, let's get back to a maximum aerobic speed. We can see the last entry for that player and also the rank. So because this is already sorted, we're gonna see incremental rank over here. Percentile, that's a way also, that's one way to normalize the score, and a metric z-score based on a standard deviation of this group. So you can see that this guy is pretty much 2.4 standard deviations, and that's pretty far away from a middle, and in this case the middle is dashed line. In this case, I don't recommend selecting more metrics. It's gonna take the average of the metrics, so you can only select a single metric if you want reliable scores. For example, yo-yo intermittent recovery. We can see who's the best guy in a squad with yo-yo intermittent recovery. If you want more data for that guy, we can select it over and see what might be happening to his intermittent recovery over time. We can see there's a increase and drop, and we can see how is he related to the group. In this case, that's KCS, and that's pretty much it. We covered the annual planner for sports version 2.0. We covered the annual planner or data entry pages, so that we have annual plan, calendar, training database, and monitoring database. That's basically bread and butter. We have different type of analytics or reports based on those entries, and these represent the setting pages in which you can also access by clicking on the links. For example, if you want to set up the athletes, you can always click over here Instead of the athletes, maybe we have different position. You can go over here. It's going to take you to the list where you can actually select, in this case, positions or whatever that's in a drop-down list. As noted earlier, this is a most useful version, but any type of customization, please email me at complementarytraining@gmail.com, and I'm pretty open to collaborate on any type of customizations. Thank you for listening, and hope that this system is gonna be useful to your own club and to your own needs.